Sophia Martinez can fold napkins 3 different ways, recite wine vintages by heart, and fake a perfect upper-class act, all for one goal: catching the eye of Silicon Valley's most eligible bachelor, Connor Bishop. But between borrowed designer watches and rehearsed small talk, she never expected her elaborate lie to crash headlong into an even bigger deception. In a world of fake fortune and real danger, pretending to be rich might be the least of her problems. Sophia Martinez stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her small studio apartment's bathroom. The bags under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion from working double shifts at the local diner. But tonight was different. Tonight she would step into another world, one where she wasn't the daughter of a single mom, struggling to make ends meet while putting herself through community college. With trembling hands, she applied the MAC lipstick she'd saved up for 3 weeks to buy. The designer dress she wore still had the tags tucked away. She planned to return it tomorrow, before the 24-hour window closed at Nordstrom. Her best friend Rachel had taught her that trick, though she never approved of Sophia's plan to infiltrate the world of San Francisco's young elite. "Just be yourself," Rachel had pleaded earlier that day. "If he's worth it, he'll like you for who you are." But Sophia knew better, or at least she thought she did. She'd watched Connor Bishop from afar for months at the coffee shop, where he regularly held court with his endless parade of admirers. With his perfectly coiffed dark hair, tailored suits, and the way he casually dropped references to his family's vacation home, Connor represented everything Sophia had ever dreamed of. The plan had been simple enough. She'd finally worked up the courage to speak to him 2 weeks ago, carefully crafting her persona as Sophia Montenegro, the daughter of a Chilean shipping magnate. One carefully timed accidental meeting at the coffee shop, where she'd loudly discussed property investments on a fake phone call within his earshot, and Connor had taken the bait. Now, as she prepared for their third date, Sophia felt the familiar twist of guilt in her stomach. The lies were becoming more complex, harder to maintain. She'd created an entire fictional life, complete with invented stories about her nonprofit work, helping underprivileged children, naturally, and her recent travels to Europe. The irony wasn't lost on her that the only true thing she'd told him was her first name. Her phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Car's downstairs. Can't wait to see you." Sophia took one last look in the mirror, adjusting the borrowed Cartier watch on her wrist. Another of Rachel's reluctant contributions to her charade. The timepiece probably cost more than 6 months of her rent. As she stepped out into the cool San Francisco evening, Sophia made sure to exit through the back of her building. Connor couldn't know she lived in this part of town. Instead, she'd given him the address of a luxury apartment complex 6 blocks away, where she always waited for him out front. The black Tesla purred quietly at the curb, and Connor stepped out to greet her. His smile still made her knees weak, even after 3 dates. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, and his green eyes sparkled with genuine warmth. "You look stunning," he said, kissing her cheek. The scent of his cologne made her head spin. "I have something special planned for tonight." Sophia's heart raced. Their previous dates had been at exclusive restaurants where she'd struggled to pronounce the French menu items and prayed he wouldn't notice she always ordered one of the least expensive options. What could top those? The Symphony, she guessed, remembering how he'd mentioned his family's box seats at the San Francisco Symphony. Connor shook his head, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "Even better, but first, dinner at Gary Danko. I hope you're hungry." Sophia's stomach clenched. She'd researched Gary Danko online. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. She'd have to be extra careful to maintain her facade tonight. As they drove through the city, Connor talked about his day at the venture capital firm where he worked as a partner. Sophia listened attentively, picking up details she could use to make her own fictional life more convincing. She'd become an expert at redirecting conversations when they got too close to exposing her lie. "Enough about my day," Connor said as they pulled up to the restaurant. "Tell me more about your foundation's new project in Santiago. It must be rewarding to help so many children." Sophia launched into the carefully rehearsed story she'd constructed, based on articles she'd read online about educational initiatives in Chile. As they were seated at their table, the best in the house, naturally, she couldn't help but notice how intently Connor listened to every word. There was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. The waiter appeared with a bottle of champagne Connor had apparently pre-ordered. As he poured, Sophia caught a glimpse of the label and nearly choked. She'd seen that same bottle behind glass at a wine shop. It cost over $400. "A toast," Connor said, raising his glass. To new beginnings and honest connection. Something in his tone made Sophia's hand tremble as she lifted her own glass. The word honest seemed to hang in the air between them like an accusation. As they studied their menus, Connor's phone buzzed several times in quick succession. He glanced at it, frowning slightly before turning it face down on the table. "Everything okay?" Sophia asked, grateful for any distraction from the menu prices she was trying hard not to look at. "Just work," he said smoothly. "You know how it is with international markets. Someone's always awake somewhere." Sophia nodded knowingly, though her only experience with international markets was stocking imported candies at the diner where she worked. The dinner progressed like a beautiful dream, with course after exquisite course. Sophia found herself relaxing despite her nervousness, drawn in by Connor's charm and wit. He had a way of making her feel like she was the only person in the room, and for brief moments, she could almost forget she was living a lie. As they finished their dessert, a chocolate souffle that made Sophia forget her own name for a moment, Connor reached across the table and took her hand. "Sophia," he said, his voice serious, "there's something I need to tell you." Her heart stopped. Had he discovered her deception? But before he could continue, his phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. Connor glanced at it and his face changed almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry. I have to take this. Business never sleeps, right?" He stood and walked toward the restaurant's entrance, already speaking rapidly into the phone in what sounded like Mandarin. Left alone at the table, Sophia fought the urge to flee. Every moment alone was another opportunity for her carefully constructed world to unravel. She watched Connor through the restaurant's front window, noting how his relaxed demeanor had shifted to something more intense. When he returned to the table, he seemed distracted. "I'm so sorry about that. Where were we?" "You were about to tell me something," Sophia reminded him, both dreading and needing to know what he'd been about to say. "Ah, yes," Connor's smile returned, but something had changed. "Actually, it can wait. The night's still young, and I still have that surprise for you." As they left the restaurant, Sophia noticed Connor checking his phone more frequently. Each time, that same subtle tension would cross his face before he tucked the device away. The Tesla wound its way up into the hills above the city. Sophia's curiosity battled with her growing anxiety. Every minute they spent together was another opportunity for her to make a mistake, to say something that would expose her lie. "Where are we going?" she asked as they passed through an exclusive neighborhood where every house looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. "You'll see," Connor said, but his voice was distant. He was checking his phone again, typing rapidly with one hand while steering with the other. They pulled up to a gate, and Connor punched in a code. As they drove up the winding driveway, Sophia gasped. The house, if you could call it that, was more like a modern castle, all glass and steel and dramatic lighting. "Welcome to my humble abode," Connor said, but something in his tone was off. Was he nervous too? Sophia's mind raced. She'd assumed he lived in one of the luxury high-rises downtown. This was something else entirely. How had she never known about this house? How much else did she not know about Connor Bishop? As they parked, Sophia noticed another car in the driveway, a red Ferrari that hadn't been visible from the gate. Connor's expression tightened when he saw it. "Unexpected guest?" Sophia asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Something like that," Connor muttered. He helped her out of the car, but his earlier smooth charm had been replaced by something more urgent, almost nervous. They approached the front door, and Sophia could hear music playing inside. Connor hesitated before entering the code into the keypad, and Sophia noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Just before he opened the door, he turned to her. "Sophia, before we go in, there's something you should know." But before he could finish, the door swung open from the inside. A tall woman in a sleek black dress stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Connor," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent Sophia couldn't place. "I've been waiting for you." Connor's face went pale. "Natasha, I wasn't expecting you until next week." The woman, Natasha, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Plans change. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Sophia stood frozen, feeling like she'd stumbled into a scene from a movie she hadn't been cast in. The way Natasha's eyes swept over her made her intensely aware of her borrowed watch and soon-to-be-returned dress. "Of course," Connor said, his usual smoothness returning, though Sophia could detect an undercurrent of tension. "Natasha, this is Sophia Montenegro. Sophia, this is Natasha Petrova, my business associate." Something about the pause before business associate made Sophia's skin prickle. Natasha extended a manicured hand, and Sophia shook it, noting the Russian woman's grip was just slightly too firm to be friendly. "Montenegro?" Natasha raised an eyebrow. "Any relation to the shipping family in Santiago?" Before Sophia could stammer out her rehearsed background story, Connor interrupted. Let's continue this inside, shall we? It's getting chilly out here. The interior of the house was even more impressive than its exterior. A floating staircase curved up to the second floor, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the San Francisco skyline. Modern art pieces that probably cost more than Sophia's entire education adorned the walls. Drink, Connor offered, heading straight for a glass bar cart that looked like it belonged in a museum of modern art. His hands shook slightly as he poured 3 glasses of what Sophia recognized as expensive scotch. Always the gentleman, Natasha said, her voice dripping with something that wasn't quite sarcasm. She perched herself on a white leather sofa, crossing her long legs. So, Sophia, Connor must have been quite taken with you. He usually doesn't bring his dates here. Sophia accepted the glass Connor handed her, grateful for something to do with her hands. We've only been seeing each other for a few weeks, she said carefully. Interesting timing, Natasha mused, swirling her drink. Very interesting timing indeed. Connor sat down next to Sophia, but she noticed he kept glancing at his phone, which hadn't stopped buzzing since they arrived. The screen lit up with messages in what looked like Russian. Sophia, Connor said suddenly, would you excuse us for just a moment? Natasha and I need to discuss some urgent business matters. Before Sophia could respond, both of them disappeared into what appeared to be a home office, closing the door behind them. Their voices, though muffled, were clearly heated. Left alone in the vast living room, Sophia felt more out of place than ever. Her eyes wandered over the space, taking in details she hadn't noticed at first. A stack of passports on a side table, a laptop screen showing what looked like financial charts with red arrows pointing downward, a newspaper with Cyrillic text. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. How's the date going? Please tell me you're going to come clean with him soon. Sophia stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. How could she explain what was happening when she didn't understand it herself? Through the office door, she could hear Natasha's voice rise. You promised it would be handled by now. Connor's response was too quiet to make out, but it sounded urgent, pleading. Sophia's instincts were screaming at her to leave, to get out before whatever was happening here exploded in her face. But curiosity, the same curiosity that had led her to approach Connor in the first place, kept her rooted to the spot. She took a sip of her scotch, grimacing at the burning sensation. As she set the glass down, she noticed something odd about the modern art piece hanging above the fireplace. The frame seemed to be sitting slightly away from the wall on one side. Without quite knowing why, Sophia moved closer to the painting. The angle was definitely off, and behind it, was that a safe? Finding anything interesting? Sophia whirled around. Connor stood in the office doorway, his earlier charm completely gone. His face was tight with stress, and behind him, Natasha was making a call in rapid-fire Russian. I was just admiring the art, Sophia said quickly. It's beautiful. Is it a local artist? Connor crossed the room in 3 long strides. You know what's interesting, Sophia? I've been doing some research of my own. The Montenegro shipping family, they don't seem to have a daughter named Sophia. In fact, they don't seem to have any daughters at all. Sophia's heart stopped. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. But before she could speak, Connor continued. But that's okay, he said, his voice taking on an odd tone. Because I haven't been entirely honest with you either. Sophia's mouth went dry. What do you mean? Connor ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way that made him look suddenly younger, more vulnerable. This house? The car? The venture capital job? It's all... He gestured vaguely. Let's just say it's not exactly what it seemed. Natasha emerged from the office, still on her phone. She barked something in Russian before hanging up. They're coming, she said to Connor. 20 minutes, maybe less. Who's coming? Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Connor ignored her question. Why did you lie about being rich, Sophia? What were you really after? The absurdity of the situation made Sophia laugh, despite her fear. Me? I'm just a waitress at Joe's diner who was stupid enough to think she could pretend to be someone she's not, to date a guy who was way out of her league. Or at least, she looked around the increasingly suspicious house. Who I thought was out of my league? Joe's diner? Connor's eyebrows shot up. On Market Street? With the blue awning? Sophia nodded, confused by his sudden interest in her workplace. I knew I recognized you from somewhere else, he muttered. You were there that day when... When what? Natasha interrupted sharply. Connor shook his head. Never mind. Sophia, you need to leave. Now. Forget you ever met me. Forget this house. Forget everything. Not so fast, Natasha said, moving to block the door. She knows too much already, and if she really is just a waitress playing dress-up, maybe we could use her. Connor's face hardened. No, absolutely not. She stays out of this. More Russian voices could be heard outside, along with the sound of car doors slamming. Too late, Natasha said with a cold smile. Your little girlfriend is about to get a crash course in how the other half really lives. Sophia's mind raced. The borrowed watch suddenly felt like it was burning her wrist. Look, I don't know what's going on here, but I swear I won't tell anyone about whatever this is. I'm good at keeping secrets. Obviously. She tried to laugh, but it came out as more of a squeak. Shut up, both of you, Connor hissed, pulling out his phone again. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Sophia, when I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back, don't ask questions, just run. But there's a back door through the kitchen, he continued, his voice low and urgent. The gate code is 4891. Once you're out, turn right and keep going until you hit Maple Drive. There's a 24-hour diner there. I know it, Sophia said. I applied for a job there last year. Connor's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Of course you did. Heavy footsteps approached the front door. Natasha straightened her dress and moved to open it. Wait, Sophia said. Connor, what's really going on here? Who are you? Someone who's in way over his head, he replied. Just like you, apparently. He glanced at his phone one last time. The thing is, Sophia, I'm not actually... The front door burst open. 3 men in dark suits entered, followed by an older man wearing an expensive-looking overcoat. His silver hair was immaculate, and his face wore the kind of tan that spoke of winters spent in tropical location. Connor, my boy, the man said in heavily accented English, we need to talk about these troubling numbers I'm seeing. Connor's whole demeanor changed. He stood straighter, his face becoming a mask of professional confidence. Mr. Volkov, I can explain everything? I'm sure you can, Volkov said, his eyes sliding to Sophia. And who is this lovely young lady? Before anyone could answer, all the lights in the house went out. In the sudden darkness, Sophia heard rapid movements and sharp commands in Russian. A hand grabbed her arm, Connor's hand, she knew instantly from the familiar warmth of his touch. Now, he whispered in her ear, run. Sophia didn't hesitate. Her instincts for self-preservation overrode her burning curiosity. She let Connor guide her through the pitch-black house, bumping into what felt like furniture. Behind them, she could hear Volkov shouting and the sound of drawers being yanked open. They burst into the kitchen, moonlight streaming through the windows, providing just enough illumination to navigate. Connor released her arm and moved to what looked like a panel on the wall. What about you? Sophia asked, hesitating by the back door. I'll be fine. This isn't my first. He paused, typing something into the panel. Let's just say, I'm good at disappearing. A crash came from the living room, followed by more shouting in Russian. Sophia caught words like files and transfer, though her Russian was limited to what she'd picked up from customers at the diner. Sophia, Connor said urgently, I need you to know something. The reason I liked you, the real reason, was because you seemed... Freeze! A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating them both. One of Volkov's men stood in the kitchen doorway, holding what was unmistakably a gun. Connor moved faster than Sophia would have thought possible. He grabbed a frying pan from the rack above the kitchen island and hurled it at the man's hand, knocking the flashlight away. In the same motion, he slammed his hand down on what must have been a button on the panel. Suddenly, sprinklers erupted throughout the house. But instead of water, they sprayed some kind of thick, dark smoke. Shouts of confusion echoed from the living room. Security measure, Connor explained, grabbing Sophia's hand again. Come on! They ran through the back door into the cool night air. The garden was elaborate, with winding paths between sculptured hedges. Connor led her through them with the confidence of someone who had practiced this route. The gate, Sophia gasped as they ran. We'll never have time to... But Connor was pulling her away from the main gate, toward a barely visible gap in the hedges. They squeezed through into what appeared to be a neighboring property's garden. Shortcuts, Connor said with a grim smile. Always have shortcuts. They could hear voices spreading out through the garden they'd just left. Flashlight beams swept the hedges. Who are you, really? Sophia demanded as they crouched behind a stone fountain. And don't tell me you're just a venture capitalist. Connor checked his phone, which was displaying what looked like security camera feeds. Would you believe me if I said I was a con man trying to go straight? After tonight, I'd believe you if you said you were a secret agent. He laughed softly. Nothing that glamorous, just someone who got in too deep with the wrong people. Started as a simple investment scheme, but when you're dealing with Russian oligarchs, he shrugged. Things get complicated. And Natasha, my handler, or at least she was supposed to be, turned out she was playing both sides. Voices approached their hiding spot. Connor tensed, ready to run again. You know what's funny? Sophia whispered. I spent so much time crafting this fake rich girl persona, worried you'd find out I was just a waitress. And here you are, running from Russian mobsters. Life's full of surprises, Connor replied. For what it's worth, I knew something was off about your story from the second date. Real rich people don't try that hard to prove they're rich. How would you know? You're not actually rich either. No, but I've spent 5 years pretending to be. You learn to spot the signs. He checked his phone again. Listen, Sophia, after tonight, don't, she interrupted. Don't tell me to forget you, or that we can never see each other again. I've seen enough movies to know that speech. Connor smiled, and for the first time that night, it reached his eyes. Actually, I was going to say I might need your help. How do you feel about using those waitressing skills of yours for something a little more interesting? Before Sophia could answer, a new sound cut through the night. Police sirens, growing closer. That would be my insurance policy, Connor said. Turns out the FBI is very interested in Mr. Volkov's business dealing. You called the FBI? Sophia stared at him in disbelief. Let's just say I've been feeding them information for months. Tonight was supposed to be the big sting, but Natasha showed up early and complicated things. He stood, offering her his hand. So, what do you say? Ready to turn those fake rich girl skills into something more profitable? Legally profitable, of course. Sophia looked at his offered hand, then back at the chaos unfolding at the mansion behind them. Police cars were pulling up to the gate, and she could see figures running through the smoke-filled house. I must be crazy, she said, taking his hand. Crazy is good, Connor replied, pulling her up. Crazy means you're paying attention. He started to say something else, but then his phone buzzed with an incoming text. His expression changed as he read it. What is it? Sophia asked. Remember how I said things were complicated? Connor showed her the screen. The message was in Russian, but the string of numbers that followed it needed no translation. They just got more complicated. Sophia squinted at the numbers on the screen. That looks like a bank account balance, Connor finished. Or rather, what's left of it. Someone just cleaned out the entire Volkov investment fund, all $50 million of it. Natasha? Connor shook his head. No, this is someone else. Someone who's been waiting for this exact moment. He typed rapidly on his phone, his face illuminated by the blue glow. The transfer was routed through banks in 7 different countries. The sirens were getting louder. Through the hedge, they could see FBI agents surrounding the mansion, their flashlights cutting through the dissipating smoke. We need to move, Connor said, tucking his phone away. There's a safe house in Chinatown. We can... Wait, Sophia interrupted. Why are you telling me all this? An hour ago, I was just your fake rich girlfriend. Now you're involving me in whatever this is? Connor's expression softened. Because you're like me, Sophia. You understand what it means to live between worlds, to wear masks. And right now, I need someone I can trust. Trust? Sophia laughed incredulously. We've both been lying to each other since the day we met. Exactly. We're both liars, which means we know how to spot lies. And right now, everything about this situation feels wrong. He glanced at his phone again. That money transfer? It's too clean, too perfect. Someone knew this was going to happen tonight. A shout went up from the mansion. They'd found something. Connor tensed. Look, he said urgently. I understand if you want to walk away, go back to your life, forget any of this happened. But if you stay, if you help me figure out what's really going on here, he pulled something from his pocket. A small key with an intricate design. This opens a safety deposit box at First Republic Bank. Inside is everything I've gathered over the past 5 years about Volkov's operation. And something else. Something bigger. Sophia took the key, feeling its weight in her palm. What's bigger than $50 million? Try $5 billion, a new voice said from behind them. They spun around. A woman stood there, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. She wore an elegant pantsuit and held herself with the kind of confidence that only comes from genuine old money. Hello, Connor, she said, smiling. Or should I say, Agent Thomas? Connor's face went completely blank. Sophia looked between them, her mind racing to catch up. Agent, she whispered. CIA, the woman supplied helpfully. Though he's gone a bit off book lately, haven't you, Connor? Mrs. Blackwood, Connor said carefully. I wasn't expecting you to be personally involved. When $5 billion of government funds are at stake, of course I'm involved. She turned her attention to Sophia. Miss Martinez, yes, we know who you really are. You've stumbled into something far larger than rich boys and their trust fund. Sophia's head was spinning. I don't understand. If Connor's CIA, then what was all this about? The dates, the lies, Volkov? That's what I'd like to know, Mrs. Blackwood said, her smile never wavering. Why don't we discuss it somewhere more private? My car's waiting around the corner. Connor subtly shifted his position, placing himself between Sophia and Mrs. Blackwood. With all due respect, ma'am, I think we'll pass. The last person who invited us for a private chat ended up sicking Russian mobsters on us. Oh, Connor, Mrs. Blackwood sighed. You always were too clever for your own good. That's why we recruited you in the first place. She reached into her jacket, and both Connor and Sophia tensed. But she only withdrew a small USB drive. Do you know what this is? I can guess, Connor said grimly. The real reason Volkov's been laundering money through Silicon Valley venture capital firms. The real reason we let you play your little game of cat and mouse with him. She held up the drive. This is worth far more than money, and you know it. Police helicopters were approaching now, their searchlights sweeping the neighborhood. Sophia clutched the key Connor had given her mind racing. If he was CIA, did that mean everything had been a lie? But then why tell her about the safety deposit box? Sophia, Connor said quietly, not taking his eyes off Mrs. Blackwood, remember what I said about masks? Sometimes the best disguise is the truth hidden in plain sight. Mrs. Blackwood laughed. Are you still trying to play her? Or have you actually developed feelings for your Mark? Mark? Sophia's voice cracked. I was your Mark. No, Connor said firmly. You were a complication. A beautiful, unexpected complication that made me question everything about this mission. How romantic, Mrs. Blackwood drawled. But we're running out of time. The FBI is about to discover that their star informant is actually CIA. Volkov's money is in the wind, and somewhere in this city is a safety deposit box that could bring down half the tech industry. So, what's it going to be? Sophia felt the weight of both their gazes on her. The key in her palm seemed to burn with possibility. Connor, if that was even his real name, had given it to her, not Mrs. Blackwood. That had to mean something. You said I was a mark, Sophia said slowly, her waitress instincts for reading people kicking in. But Connor gave me this key before you showed up. Either he's the worst CIA agent ever, or she let the thought hang in the air. Mrs. Blackwood's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Very good, Miss Martinez. I can see why he likes you. But you're playing a game you don't understand. Maybe, Sophia admitted. But I understand people. I've spent years serving them, watching them, learning their tells. And you? She took a step closer to Connor. You're not as comfortable with that USB drive as you want us to believe. Connor's shoulder brushed against hers, a silent message of support. Or was it a warning? The FBI will be here any minute, Mrs. Blackwood said. Are you really going to risk everything for a man who's been lying to you since the day you met? That's rich, Sophia laughed, coming from someone who won't even tell us who she really works for. Because you're not CIA, are you? Connor's sharp intake of breath confirmed her suspicion. Mrs. Blackwood's smile vanished. You're cleverer than your file suggested, but cleverness won't save you from what's coming. She raised her hand, and suddenly multiple red laser dots appeared on both Sophia and Connor's chests. The safety deposit box, Mrs. Blackwood said. All pretense gone. Now, Connor moved faster than Sophia thought possible. He grabbed her around the waist and pulled her behind the fountain just as the first silenced shots pinged off the stone. Still trust me? He whispered in her ear. Ask me again when we're not being shot at, Sophia replied, her heart pounding. Connor pulled out his phone one last time. Remember how I said I had an insurance policy with the FBI? He pressed a button. That wasn't my only one. Suddenly, the sprinkler system in Mrs. Blackwood's garden erupted, but instead of smoke, it sprayed what looked like pepper spray. Shouts and curses erupted from the hidden snipers. Run! Connor grabbed Sophia's hand, and they dashed through the chaos. Where are we going? Sophia gasped as they sprinted down the hill. First Republic Bank closes in an hour, Connor said. Just enough time to get what we need and disappear. We? Connor squeezed her hand. If you want, though I should warn you, my real life is a lot less glamorous than my fake one. Good, Sophia said, because I'm getting really tired of pretending to be something I'm not. They could hear cars starting behind them, engines revving. One more thing, Connor said as they ran. That USB drive she showed us, it's fake. The real one is... A bullet whizzed past them, embedding itself in a tree. Tell me later, Sophia interrupted, preferably over coffee. At a normal cafe, not one of your fancy surveillance spots. Connor grinned. Deal, but first... He pulled her into the shadow of a building as more shots rang out. How do you feel about one last act of deception? For old time's sake? Sophia looked into his eyes, seeing for the first time not the polished venture capitalist or the supposed CIA agent, but someone as lost and searching as she was. What did you have in mind? Connor pulled out what looked like a garage door opener. Ever wonder why Silicon Valley has so many underground parking garages? Before Sophia could answer, he pressed the button. In the street before them, a manhole cover slid aside with a mechanical whir, revealing a sleek metal platform. Your maintenance worker disguise is showing, Sophia said with a smile. Sometimes the best hiding places are in plain sight, Connor replied, helping her onto the platform. Ready to see how the other half really lives? As long as we're being honest with each other from now on. The platform began to descend as shots rang out above them. Connor pulled Sophia close. Almost honest, he whispered. We've all got to keep some mysteries, right? As they disappeared underground, Sophia clutched the safety deposit box key tighter. Whatever truth lay ahead, At least she could stop pretending to be someone she wasn't, even if that meant becoming someone she never expected to be. The underground tunnel was surprisingly well lit, stretching endlessly in both directions. Electric service carts lined one wall, while the other displayed an elaborate map of what appeared to be the entire Bay Area underground network. "Let me guess," Sophia said, as Connor led her to one of the carts. "This isn't just a maintenance tunnel. Originally built during the Cold War," Connor explained, starting up the cart. Then Silicon Valley companies started buying up sections for private use, moving sensitive materials, avoiding traffic, he grinned, escaping Russian mobsters, and mysterious women with fake USB drives. Among other things, Connor checked a tablet mounted on the dashboard. "We've got about 15 minutes before they figure out how to access this level. The good news is, we're only 10 minutes from the bank." Sophia settled into the passenger seat, her mind racing. "You still haven't told me what's really in that safety deposit box." "Because I don't know exactly," Connor admitted, accelerating the cart down the tunnel. "But I know it's connected to Project Oracle." Project Oracle? A quantum computing initiative. Officially, it's a collaboration between major tech companies to develop the next generation of processing power. Unofficially, he shook his head. "Let's just say there's a reason Mrs. Blackwood is willing to kill for it." The cart's wheels hummed against the concrete as they took a sharp turn. Sophia noticed security cameras tracking their movement, their red lights blinking steadily. "Those cameras," she said, "are they already taken care of? Right now they're showing an empty tunnel from 20 minutes ago." "You really did think of everything." Connor's expression darkened. "Not everything. I never planned on getting attached to anyone during this operation. Never planned on dragging someone else into this mess." "I dragged myself into it," Sophia reminded him. "The moment I decided to pretend to be someone I'm not." "About that," Connor said, slowing the cart as they approached a junction. "Why did you do it? Really?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, watching the tunnel lights flash by. "I guess I was tired of being invisible. When you're a waitress, people look right through you. I thought if I could just be someone else for a while, you could feel what it's like to matter." "Something like that." She turned to look at him. "What about you? Why did you become—" She gestured vaguely. "A professional liar?" Connor smiled wryly. "Would you believe me if I said it started as an actual CIA recruitment? But then I saw things, patterns in the data that didn't make sense, money moving in ways it shouldn't. And when I started asking questions, a loud boom echoed through the tunnel behind them, followed by the sound of mechanical doors opening. "They're in," Connor said grimly, accelerating again. "Faster than I expected." Sophia checked the rearview mirror, seeing lights in the distance. "Please tell me you have another backup plan." "Several, but you might not like them." He handed her his phone. "Third app from the left. Open it." Sophia found the app. It looked like a simple calculator. "Now what?" "Enter this code, 73941. As soon as she entered the last number, the screen changed, showing what looked like building schematic. "First Republic's main vault," Connor explained. "The safety deposit boxes are actually a front. The real vault is—" Another explosion rocked the tunnel, closer this time. In the rearview mirror, Sophia could see 3 black SUVs gaining on. "Less explaining, more escaping," she suggested. Connor nodded, taking another sharp turn. "See that red button under the dashboard? When I say now, press it." "What will it do?" "Better if you don't know. Plausible deniability and all that." The SUVs were getting closer. Sophia could see figures leaning out the windows, taking aim. "Now might be a good time for that button," she said. "Not yet. We need them closer." "Closer? Are you insane?" Connor's eyes gleamed. "Remember what you said about being tired of being invisible? Well, sometimes the best way to hide—" He suddenly slammed on the brakes. "Now!" Sophia smashed the red button. Behind them, the tunnel erupted in a cascade of sparks as every electrical panel along the walls short-circuited simultaneously. Through the chaos, she heard tires screeching and metal crunching. "Is to blind them with light," Connor finished, accelerating again into the darkness ahead. "That was—" Sophia searched for words. "Reckless? Dangerous? Completely irresponsible?" "I was going to say impressive." She looked at him. "You know, for a professional liar, you're pretty good at the truth too." Connor's expression softened. "Maybe that's because—" His words were cut off by the sound of screeching metal above them. The tunnel ceiling was opening up, revealing the night sky, and a helicopter descending toward them, its searchlight cutting through the darkness. "Please tell me that's the good guys," Sophia said. Connor's grim expression told her everything she needed to know. "So," she said, clutching the safety deposit box key tighter, "about those backup plans you mentioned." Connor swerved the cart into a narrow maintenance tunnel, just as bullets rained down from the helicopter. The space was barely wide enough for the vehicle, sparks flying as they scraped against the wall. "The bank vault," Sophia said, studying the schematics on the phone. "It connects to this tunnel system, doesn't it? That's why you chose First Republic. See? This is why I need you." Connor flashed her a quick smile. Everyone else was so focused on what was in the safety deposit box. They never asked why I chose that particular bank. The tunnel began to slope upward. Ahead, Sophia could see what looked like a metal service door. "That's our way in," Connor said. "Once we're inside, we have exactly 3 minutes before their backup power kicks in and all the alarms reactivate. And then we find out what Project Oracle really is." He reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a casino chip. "Here, you might need this." Sophia took the chip, feeling its weight. It wasn't plastic like a normal casino chip. It was metal, with intricate circuitry embedded in its surface. "Quantum encryption key," Connor explained. "The only way to access the real data. Mrs. Blackwood's USB drive? Just a fancy paperweight." The cart screeched to a halt in front of the service door. Through the tunnel behind them, they could hear engines and shouting. "Ready?" Connor asked, pulling out an electronic lockpick. Sophia clutched the quantum key in one hand and the safety deposit box key in the other. "You know, when I decided to pretend to be rich to date you, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind." Connor laughed as he worked on the door. "And when I was assigned to investigate tech industry corruption, falling for a waitress pretending to be an heiress wasn't in my mission brief." "Falling for?" The door clicked open. Connor turned to her, his expression serious despite the chaos around them. "Sometimes the best disguise is no disguise at all." They could hear the helicopter landing somewhere above them. Time was running out. "Sophia Martinez," Connor said, "would you like to help me save Silicon Valley from itself?" Sophia looked at the man she'd first noticed in an overpriced coffee shop, the man she'd lied to, the man who'd lied to her, the man who somehow, in the middle of all those lies, had shown her what truth really meant. "On one condition," she said. "Name it. Our next date? Let's make it somewhere normal. No fake identities, no hidden agendas." "Deal." He held out his hand. "Partners?" Sophia took it, feeling the warmth of his grip. Partners. Together, they stepped through the door into whatever truth awaited them, leaving behind the masks they'd worn and the lies they'd told. Because sometimes, Sophia realized, you have to pretend to be someone else to figure out who you really are. And sometimes, the biggest secret of all is that being yourself is enough.